Today is exactly a month since the Derecho, which knocked out power for hundreds of thousands of people. It changed lives and perhaps livelihoods forever in eastern Iowa, from people facing homelessness in just minutes to trees crushing cars, trucks, and businesses.
Well, there were many who needed help in the immediate aftermath of the storm. But KCRG TV9 investigative reporter Ethan Stein found out a county official denied help from outside sources. And Ethan's live in our newsroom to tell us the story.
Beth, Chris, new emails uncovered from I-9 show the Linn County Emergency Management Coordinator denied help from other public agencies and sometimes ignored help from corporations reaching out after the storm. 1 month after the derecho, I-9 learned of new emails where Linn County Emergency Management declined help from other public agencies. One email from Coordinator Steve O'Connick says, "We got whacked," but then says, "I think we're good for now," after Delaware Emergency Management offered to help if needed Wednesday through Friday.
What was good about that situation?
We showed our findings to Raymond Siddell, whose relief efforts without assistance have grown from the grill outside an office building feeding thousands to a full-blown warehouse.
And to have another county emergency management agency reach out, offering their help immediately, to basically be turned away, told we're good, we don't need you. Wow.
He's visibly frustrated, and we haven't told him what else we found. I-9 also found emails of the breakfast food chain Denny's reaching out to send a food truck to help feed people for free. But when we reached out to the company, a spokesperson confirmed Denny's did reach out to emergency management, but did not receive a response.
It was ignored. It was ignored.
The man who declined help and ignored other requests for help is Linn County Emergency Management Coordinator Steve O'Connick.
I did not know. I anticipated the need for that, but I also didn't have a way of saying, "Oh yes, please come help us because we need you." And then what if they would shown up? What if we didn't need them?
He says it's the job of non-government organizations, or NGOs, particularly United Way, to organize volunteer efforts rather than the emergency management coordinator who is doing other jobs, but acknowledges there are ways his department can improve. Back in his warehouse, Raymond thinks the consequences of ignoring help from even one company can multiply.
They're not coming back. They're not asking. And I'm sure that these relief efforts, hot food or what have you, doesn't matter what it is, I'm sure that they all communicate too, to identify the need and make sure that they're not, oversaturating a market that doesn't need additional resources. And when they find out that they're ignored or turned down, maybe they didn't reach out at all.
United Way of East Central Iowa says its registration portal was up Wednesday morning. We've tried to get emails for the city of Cedar Rapids, for the city council, the mayor, and city manager, but they're asking for over $1,000 for those emails. Live in the newsroom, Ethan Stein, KCRG TV9 News.
Much frustration about the city of Cedar Rapids' response to the derecho on August 10th got directed toward the mayor and the city council. But how much of a role do our elected officials have in the immediate aftermath of disaster response?
KCRG TV9 investigative reporter Ethan Stein is live in our Cedar Rapids newsroom to show us who ran the city's response.
Chris, Beth, our I-9 team found out a few weeks ago about the Linn County Emergency Management Coordinator declining help through emails we requested through a public records request. The city was asking for $1,000 for a similar request. After our story aired, the city changed its mind. We have obtained hundreds of emails from Mayor Brad Hart, City Manager Jeff Pomerantz, and the Incident Commander, Fire Chief Greg Smith. We found a lot of anger directed towards the mayor, rather the people who were truly controlling the city's response. The August 10th derecho hit eastern Iowa with little warning. Emails and documents reviewed by our I-9 team show that left the city of Cedar Rapids scrambling to react. City Manager Jeff Pomerantz says he knows there were gaps in a response, like at Cedar Terrace, where people were intense almost a week after the storm.
I am frustrated with elements of the response as well. We stepped up to the occasion, we met the challenge. Nothing is perfect.
The city plans to review its response. That response started with creating an incident command center at the Central Fire Station. That put city leaders from across different departments in one room, a help when communication was difficult. Normally, it's created days before a disaster hits, but because the storm came suddenly, it wasn't built up until after the storm. City Manager Jeff Pomerantz described his role in the disaster as a CEO of a private company, while the council and mayor act more as a board of directors.
My role is very similar to a private corporation, where I'm managing, in this case, the government on a day-to-day basis, but I work with, support the city council members who are elected, who report to the citizens of Cedar Rapids.
Emails show that included approving and organizing communication to let the mayor and council know how the city was responding. Cedar Rapids Fire Chief Greg Smith is the incident commander tasked with coordinating the city's response. But that response does not include shelters and humanitarian aid. That falls to nonprofits like the United Way and the American Red Cross. That's why some of the help was directed to the wrong place, ignored, or duplicated. Take this example. An ice company in Minnesota reaches out to Mayor Brad Hart, offering bags of ice, even securing a $1,000 donation. The mayor forwards him to Cedar Rapids Fire Chief Greg Smith. But Smith is not in charge of coordinating the volunteers. The result is the company never receiving a response. The city also relied on informal, verbal requests for help, putting off the formal written requests required to ask for county and state help.
The verbal is just going to simply be for that time period until we can get formally established to where we can get into that rhythm, so to speak, of requesting and having it be written.
Instead, documents from I-9 show the city manager's office created a list of needs to deliver to state and federal officials, sidestepping the normal process to make a plea for help.
We were seeking help, but we were also showing this is a huge event, and we are going to need a lot of help. And that was something that I recognized from the very, very beginning, that we're going to need a lot of help.
The city of Cedar Rapids certainly needed help, and the city was trying to get it. One way was the Iowa National Guard. The city of Cedar Rapids says it requested help since August 11th, the day after the storm hit. But our I-9 team found out the city knew they were not properly requesting the Guard. This led to a delay in their response. We'll tell you that story tomorrow. Live in the newsroom, Ethan Stein, KCRG TV 9 News.
The Iowa National Guard says it was standing ready after last month's derecho and could have helped with shelters and manpower. Instead, it took days for any formal request for help to come in.
Our I-9 investigation found the city of Cedar Rapids only made that request after the Iowa National Guard was on its way. That derecho hit back on Monday, August the 10th, with winds up to 140 miles per hour. By the next morning, the city has said it was asking for the National Guard to help, but the first members of the Guard did not arrive until late Thursday, with most of the 100 Guard members arriving on Friday. They primarily helped to clear those downed trees for power crews to work. It was not until Friday that the Palo Community Center opened as the first overnight shelter in the Cedar Rapids area. KCRG TV 9's investigative reporter Ethan Stein joins us live here in Cedar Rapids after investigating that delay in getting National Guard help. Ethan.
The city is saying they've asked for the National Guard since Tuesday, but our investigation found out the city knew those asks would not actually lead to the National Guard coming. This document is the first time the city made any formal request that would activate the Guard's disaster response. It was dated for 6 p.m. Thursday after the storm, when we know the Guard was already on its way. The city says it was surprised to learn the Guard was coming, and then they scrambled to submit a request. To this day, city leaders can't answer what prompted the Guard to come to Cedar Rapids, and still some questions if that help was really needed. By the time the Iowa National Guard was on its way to Cedar Rapids, Fire Chief Greg Smith, who coordinated the city's disaster response, says he did not think there was a mission for them.
By that point, we had not made a formal written request, nor did I think that they were able to serve any missions that we needed at that point.
But the city says it made verbal requests for National Guard help the day after the derecho. Those requests never made it to the National Guard, and the city knew it. Chief Smith says he asked for National Guard help with clearing tree debris to Linn County Emergency Management Coordinator Steve O'Connick. But O'Connick says the request was more of a discussion, and Chief Smith didn't follow up with a formal request.
I never saw a formal request from the city of Cedar Rapids or any agency for the National Guard until after we were told that they were coming.
The city's insistence that it was asking for Guard help is a sore point for Major General Ben Correll, the head of the Iowa National Guard.
Well, is it frustrating that the city's throwing you guys under the bus? Yeah, well, I'm not going to take it.
He says that formal written request is the only way he can know if his troops are needed.
Even if they would put it in the Cedar Rapids Gazette and say we want the National Guard, that would not necessarily be a demand signal that we could respond to. It would be an indicator that there's going to be something coming, but there wasn't that.
Chief Smith has 10 plus years of disaster experience. He knew the decision of who responds to a request is made at the state level. Smith said he didn't do that, trusting Steve O'Connick's advisement that the Guard couldn't help with tree removal.
But I trust that his knowledge and his working knowledge, I know his work history.
Smith says none of the other requests he made for state assistance would activate a Guard response either. But he says he wanted the Guard here as more of a symbolic public display for storm victims.
You know, obviously you see somebody in a uniform or you see somebody especially in fatigues and you go, I have a comfort level, I feel protected.
While the Guard agrees it is not best equipped for debris removal, it could have helped with other tasks that the city did not immediately request, like providing shelters. The first overnight shelter in the area did not open until Friday in Palo, 4 days after the Derecho. The first shelter in Cedar Rapids opened later that evening. That contributed to scenes like this: people sleeping in tents outside of storm-damaged apartments. The Guard can also provide manpower for humanitarian missions. Instead, city emails show the city scrambled to find enough staff to open up charging stations and city resource centers. But Chief Smith says he didn't fully understand that, so never requested it.
I knew that they could do some sort of humanitarian mission. I did not know any of the specifics, and that was one of our conversations with the local Guard unit.
That's also partially because it's by design. The city is not in charge of shelters or humanitarian relief. That duty falls to nonprofits like the United Way and the American Red Cross. Chief Smith says he had reassurances from those agencies that those tasks were under control. So the big question is, who called the National Guard? And the truth is that nobody knows, and that includes the city. Live in Cedar Rapids, Ethan Stein, KCRG TV 9 News.
Tonight, our I-9 investigation into the response to the derecho reveals the groups in charge of the humanitarian response for Linn County were unable to perform their roles in the early days, and in one case were completely unaware of the situation on the ground. We've already reported that the city admits there were gaps in the response to an unprecedented storm in Cedar Rapids. It plans to conduct a full review to look for improvements in its disaster response plan.
We also found city leaders were disconnected from knowing what to request from the Iowa National Guard that ultimately delayed the help. KCRG TV 9 investigative reporter Ethan Stein is live in our Cedar Rapids newsroom to tell us why the city believed other groups would provide shelter and food. Ethan.
Nonprofit organizations play a key role in the city and county disaster plan. Those agencies, not the government, are tasked with things like organizing volunteer efforts, passing out food, and setting up emergency shelters. But many of those efforts were hampered in the aftermath of the derecho, and we found those organizations were caught off guard, unprepared, or in some cases, unaware of the need for help.
I don't know. There's got to be hundreds. I mean, I have boxes down here as well. And they were coming in shipments.
Raymond Siddell has enough toothbrushes, bottles of soap, and other donated items to help thousands. His efforts started after seeing so many people wanting to or needing help but not knowing where to go.
But there was nobody to call. There were no efforts going on, at least from a known name.
It shouldn't have been Siddell's Derecho Relief Facebook page leading the effort. Instead, Linn County's disaster plan puts nonprofits like the Red Cross, United Way, and the Salvation Army in charge of the humanitarian response. The Red Cross is the only group in charge of shelters. United Way helps sets up volunteer efforts, and the Salvation Army helps with food distribution. The city of Cedar Rapids never called the National Guard to help with any of these humanitarian needs because it received assurances that the nonprofits had it under control.
They knew that they were struggled, but they are activated now, and those resources will be, shelters and other needs would be stood up and would be active shortly.
But the Red Cross says its regional office didn't fully understand the need for sheltering in Cedar Rapids until days after the storm.
We weren't there physically like we've been before as much, and that's lesson learned. We're acknowledging that's lesson learned.
The result was the first overnight shelter wasn't set up until 4 days after the storm. Their regional spokesperson says he can't answer why it took so long to understand the situation on the ground.
I don't know. I don't have that answer for you. We rely on getting that information from our government officials and local partners on that, and so I can't answer that.
Lynn County Emergency Management Coordinator Steve O'Connick was disappointed with the Red Cross's efforts after he called the day after the storm hit asking for shelters.
Is that an unrealistic expectation? And if it is, then I need to find resources within my county to be able to provide that resource when the expectation is not met.
United Way is in charge of setting up an emergency volunteer center. It says it was up and running 2 days after the storm, fulfilling its task. But the United Way acknowledged it faces more red tape to organize volunteering than average people helping out a neighbor. The Salvation Army's building lost power and sustained damage in the storm. It didn't start passing out food until it received power back 2 days later. Shala Ashworth is the communications director, but ran its response to the storm.
We participate with the city, or with the county, with the Lynn County Management Association as one of the partners. I don't know what the plan is.
That's because she's not supposed to. The officers of the Salvation Army in Cedar Rapids know the county's disaster plan, but were on vacation in Chicago when the storm hit. It left Ashworth organizing the response without the leadership, setting up meal and food distribution sites around the metro area.
I don't know what the plan is.
We shared our findings with Raymond.
There are entire officers that was gone with no backup plan should something happen back at home. And this individual who did not know the plan was expected to activate this unknown plan and make sure that Salvation Army was present and involved in helping the community after the natural disaster. I mean, kudos to her.
Raymond's relief efforts are still going, saying the need isn't gone yet 2 months after the storm hit. He says that's a sign the disaster plan fell short.
For offers of help to be ignored or turned down, to not know how to ask for help, they failed us. They absolutely let us down as a community.
These nonprofits don't get local funding for fulfilling these disaster responsibility roles, so they can't face fines or budget cuts. But Lynn County Emergency Management Agency says it will review their involvement in those roles going forward. You can check out this story and our earlier reporting on the Derecho response on KCRG.com. Live in the newsroom, Ethan Stein, KCRG TV 9 News.